Can you tell me where else in the United States that such radicalization is happening?
This has happened all over the country. We had the Boston Marathon murders that were two young Muslims, once again, who were thought to be moderate at one time. And we had the Fort Hood massacre, San Bernardino, Chattanooga. The list goes on, Orlando, Florida. The list goes on and on and on. And these are young Muslims in the United States who come to believe, for reasons that nobody has ever investigated fully, that this is the authentic expression of their faith. The U.S. Constitution and Sharia are incompatible, and the conflict between the two legal systems will grow as Sharia adherents increase in number in the West. This fact has been obscured by misinformation about what Sharia actually is. When the city of Keller, Texas, scrapped an anti-Sharia resolution in January 2026, the Hamas-linked Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, stated that like canon law for Catholics and halakha for Orthodox Jews, Sharia refers to the rules that Muslims follow, including praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, giving in charity, and following the laws of the land in which they live. If that were really all that Sharia were about, no reasonable person would have any problem with it. CAIR doesn't mention, however, that Sharia is inherently political, supremacist, expansionist, and violent. Far from being the Islamophobic conspiracy theories of CAIR's imagining, these are facts that Muslim authorities on Sharia openly attest. Reliance of the Traveler, Umdat as-Salik, is a classic manual of Islamic sacred law, that is Sharia. 1990, Dr. Taha Jabir Alawani, president of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, as well as president of the Fiqh Council of North America, stated that this Sharia manual was useful as a textbook for teaching Islamic jurisprudence. The most prestigious institution of Islamic learning in the world, Al-Azhar in Cairo, stated in 1991 that the same manual of Sharia conforms to the practice and faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. We read in this same guide to Sharia that jihad means war against non-Muslims and that it is a communal obligation upon the Muslim community. The object of this war is to establish the hegemony of Sharia over the conquered land. For non-Muslims, this means an institutionalized, highly codified second-class status that denies them basic rights. Non-Muslims living under Sharia must pay the non-Muslim poll tax, jizya, that is specified in the Quran, verse 929. This religion-based tax is designed to indicate, as the renowned Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir explained, that the non-Muslims who are paying it are disgraced, humiliated, and belittled. The non-Muslims in this state of disgrace and humiliation are not allowed to build new houses of worship or repair old ones, so their communities are in a perpetual state of decline. They are forbidden to make any public display of their religion. They're relegated to the most menial jobs in society, for they are forbidden to hold authority over Muslims. If they say anything critical about Islam, Muhammad, or the Quran, they're liable to be put to death. From all this, it is clear that Sharia is not simply Muslim personal religious law. On the contrary, Sharia-based legal and civic institutions are contrary to America's founding principles and violate federal law and the Constitution in numerous particulars. The death penalty for mentioning what Reliance of the Traveler terms as something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam, that is blasphemy, is directly at variance with First Amendment freedom of speech protections. The Islamic imperative to establish the hegemony of Sharia as the law of the land, as in today in the Islamic Republic of Iran, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, is obviously at variance with the First Amendment principle of non-establishment of a religion. Even in its personal aspects, Sharia does contradict U.S. law. The Quran states that a man should beat a woman from whom he fears disobedience. That's chapter 4, verse 34. Domestic violence is a crime in U.S. law, but it is not a crime under Sharia. And we have the example of what happened in Britain. Britain began establishing Sharia courts several years ago with the understanding that cases that came under the purview of British criminal law would be referred to the British criminal courts. Instead, the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal on its website urged the Crown Prosecution Service to reconsider bringing criminal charges against Muslim men who'd been accused of domestic violence. And as this is in the Quran, the same thing would happen here. As Sharia is considered divine law, those Muslims who adhere to it always consider that it takes precedence over the laws of the land. Moreover, emigration to a new land to bring Sharia to it is also an Islamic imperative. The Quran in chapter 4, verse 100 promises a reward from Allah to those who emigrate for the sake of Allah, which means for the purpose of bringing Sharia to a non-Muslim land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Appreciate your testimony. Ms.
So
Shiles,
now I'll go
again.
to you, Mr. Spencer, for just a sec here. On page 2 of your statement, you point out that the Quran states a man should beat a woman from whom he fears disobedience. Domestic violence is a behavior as opposed to a belief, but in the Sharia system, it seems to be a belief.
Yeah, it's certainly a belief. You can't have something in the Quran and have Muslims say that they're against it if they are going to be believing, observant Muslims. And the problem becomes when they act upon it in a Sharia context, then you have the precedent of Britain that I was explaining, that instead of referring it to the criminal courts as they had agreed to do, they tried it under Sharia and told the wife to go back and try to please her husband instead of prosecuting the man who was committing the domestic abuse.
And so Sharia actually became an institution or a third rail that replaced the British judicial system, at least in that particular case.
Exactly. The aspects of Sharia that are really controversial are political and not religious. The whole hearing here is turning on the idea that it would be terrible to restrict religious practice and in violation of the First Amendment. But the difficulty here is that Sharia, in all of its forms, and wherever it has been implemented, has been political and not just religious.
Oh, agreed.
And has been supremacist and not just egalitarian.
Yeah,
There's no Sharia state.
If I could
where
reclaim my
I yield back to the gentleman in California.
of rights
If I could
for
reclaim my time, I agree with you. There is a political aspect of it, but that is protected by our freedom of speech, our freedom to criticize it, our freedom to debate it, and our freedom to vote it down. Is that the way the system works?
Well, I don't think that the freedom of speech is in play when you're talking about active efforts to subvert constitutional order
debating
and
any
replace it
political
with
issue.
another.
That's the
I mean,
essence
obviously,
of it.
you
We all talk
cannot
among ourselves.
the classic thing of crying fire in a crowded theater. And so it's the same thing here. There are laws against subversion. There are laws against working against the constitutional order. That's what's at issue here. Sharia is not really open to debate everywhere it's been implemented in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia. It's pretty much the same.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Thank the gentleman from California. I'll now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused about this hearing. I think we all probably agree. I hadn't been here to hear everybody's agreement, but I think we all agree that Sharia law is not something that anybody would want to have to live under. It's oppressive, and it's religion that's forced on other people. But we've got a constitution already that's under attack, and the emoluments clause is being shredded. The pardons power is being abused in such a way that people question whether we even should have a pardon power, because it's not being used for the reasons by which it was put in the Constitution. Unusual cases where justice wasn't served, et cetera, and it's being used as a transactional event. And we're talking about Sharia law. We've got so much to deal with, Mr. Chairman, with our Constitution and protecting it. The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment was going on in Minnesota, murdering of citizens clear on the streets, murdering, shooting people in the back, shooting a woman in the face, not rendering aid to either one of them, not allowing doctors to render aid to them, watching them die. And those are constitutional problems. And we're talking about Sharia law. I mean, this is not really relevant to this committee and what's going on in America today. There's so much we could be dealing with concerning Constitution and protecting America. White Christian nationalist ideology has been put forward. One of the gentlemen here said something about, what is it, the certain, it might have been you, Mr. Spencer, something that the group put forward as their plan for the future, some publication or some ideology. Did you mention that?
I don't know. You might be referring to the explanatory memorandum, which is, I didn't mention, but it's a captured internal document of the Muslim Brotherhood detailing its program for the United States, where it says the brothers must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their own hands and the hands of the believers so that Allah's religion is victorious over other religions.
Right. That's
I
pretty
would
much
suggest that just saying that we got other
sir, I've got the
problems
floor.
doesn't make that
Sir,
one go
sir,
away.
I've got the floor. You're not Pam Bondi.
Sorry?
I've got the floor. You're not Pam Bondi. That's what I was getting at. And what you're talking about sounds like a Middle Eastern version of Project 2025, another type of manifesto to take over and do all these things and to control our government and to turn it around on its head. We should be looking at Project 2025 and what they plan to do to this country and what they're doing to this country. This is not the country that Jefferson would have known, not the country I've known, not the country that I think our Constitution foresaw, and none of this seems relevant. And it seems
Will the gentleman kindly yield?
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you to the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee. There was a mass murderer in Norway who went on an anti-Muslim rampage and killed 69 people. You'll recall his name was Anders Breivik. And he denounced Norwegian politicians as failing to defend the country against the Muslim takeover. And I raise it because I want to introduce this article from the New York Times. He invoked your work, Mr. Spencer. You're probably aware of that. You probably know about this New York Times article that he frequently quoted Robert Spencer, who operates the Jihad Watch website, all of which goes to, I think, demonstrate the point I was making before, that fanatics can take up any ideology, religious or secular, and use it to commit horrific crimes, all of which to me would suggest that all of us should be careful about whether we're speaking up for general principles like the separation of church and state and against religious fanaticism of every kind, or whether we're trying to demonize and vilify a particular group. I don't know if you have any response.
Well, yeah, in
to that New
terms
York
of
Times.
demonizing and vilifying, obviously this would be an example of it because Anders Breivik quoted me. Yes, he actually quoted a documentary that I was in, and so every time my name was mentioned as speaking, it's listed as one of the times he mentioned, and then they say, "Oh, he mentioned him 100 times or something."
Anything
But,
about the massacre
fact
itself?
is that
Anything about the massacre
he
of all
also
the innocent
quoted
people?
Barack Obama. He quoted John
Leaving
F.
aside the
Kennedy.
quotations, do
He
you have any
quoted
thoughts
many,
about
many
the
people.
massacre of the people?
And he actually took issue with me for not counseling violence. So to bring this up really is tantamount to saying that Elizabeth Warren is responsible for the Dayton mass murders because the mass murderer invoked her name.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Cohen's time is up. I'd like to enter this New York Times article into the record. Killings in Norway spotlight anti-Muslim thought in the U.S.
And
without objection, thanks, and thank you, Mr. Cohen. And I'll recognize my friend from North Carolina, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you on the panel for what you've shared today. And you know, while there's been a lot of talk about what we don't know, and we don't know this world or we don't know that world, let me tell you what happened in my world in the 8th District of North Carolina. This past year, in late 2025, the FBI, in coordination with local law enforcement, arrested an 18-year-old in Mint Hill, North Carolina, who was plotting to carry out a deadly New Year's Eve attack in support of ISIS. According to the DOJ, this 18-year-old Christian Sturdivant is his name, sought to become a martyr for ISIS. Mr. Spencer, I just want to give you a chance to share. Can you help me understand how a kid growing up in a suburb of Charlotte, rural area in North Carolina, can be radicalized by the Islamic State?
Mr. Harris, this is a very important issue that law enforcement and intelligence agencies in the U.S. have been entirely remiss and have ignored altogether. Fact is that a young man like that in Mint Hill could easily go to numerous sites on the internet and quite possibly to people within his own community who would tell him that the Islamic State, ISIS, represents authentic Islam and that violence against unbelievers is a duty that he needed to carry out. This is something that ISIS recruiters say all over the world. They were able to attract thousands of Muslims from 100 different countries when they had their caliphate in Iraq and Syria, and this was because their claim to Islamic authenticity rang true among all too many Muslims, and nobody is countering that.
Well, and I know this happened in Mint Hill, as I mentioned. Can you tell me where else in the United States that such radicalization is happening?
This has happened all over the country. We had the Boston Marathon murders that were two young Muslims, once again, who were thought to be moderate at one time. And we had the Fort Hood massacre, San Bernardino, Chattanooga. The list goes on. Orlando, Florida. The list goes on and on and on. And these are young Muslims in the United States who come to believe, for reasons that nobody has ever investigated fully, that this is the authentic expression of their faith.
And what role is the internet playing, you believe, in the radicalization of American-born youth?
Islamic State group has frequently called upon Muslims in the United States specifically to carry out lone wolf jihad terror attacks by just starting to murder people at random when they get the opportunity. And so because they have this claim of Islamic authenticity, it's all too easy for a young man to go online and see that and think that he will be receiving a reward from Allah for carrying it out.
Well, as a pastor, for myself, I believe, obviously, that religious liberty is critically important and something we've got to be willing to do what we have to protect. However, I also recognize that a person's religious liberty doesn't mean they can impose their religious liberty onto others. So let me ask you this, Mr. Spencer. How do we balance our respect for religious liberty with the threat you see posed by Sharia law?
Seems to me we have to be able to say to the Muslim community that they're perfectly free to practice their religion, except where, in particular, it contravenes other existing American laws. For example, there were a couple of doctors in Detroit a few years back who were put on trial for practicing female genital mutilation, and their defense was that this was part of their Islamic faith and that they were carrying out as their part of their religious practice. And a judge ultimately threw the case out, saying, yes, indeed, this contravenes religious freedom, and we have to understand that it would be unconstitutional to ban female genital mutilation because it's part of Islam. And so the rights of those girls whose lives are destroyed, they don't matter at all. And that's Sharia.
Mr. Spencer, I'm going to move on to you. Let me ask you, is Islam as a political ideology, in your opinion, compatible with America's constitutional governing framework?
No, certainly not. It denies the freedom of speech, denies the equality of rights of non-Muslims with Muslims, the equality of rights of women with men, and contradicts U.S. law in numerous other particulars.
And can you tell me, what is the goal of political Islam?
Well, Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, said, Islam must dominate and not be dominated. And in every Sharia state that is on earth today and has ever been on earth, non-Muslims have not had equality of rights with Muslims in the society. The idea is to enforce a subservient position for them so that they know the pain in this world as well as the next of having rejected Muhammad, which the Quran says that they will suffer.
Under Islamic law, as it's commonly practiced, are men and women treated with equal dignity?
No, certainly not. I quoted before the passage about women beating women from whom you fear disobedience. The Quran contains nothing about beating disobedient men.
I heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who were raising objection to legislation that, and a number of bills that some of us introduced, particularly one that I introduced, that was raising the issue of vetting individuals as we're bringing them into the United States for their adherence to Sharia law. That was the idea. The idea is that Sharia law is inconsistent with our values in Western civilization, so we should know if we're bringing people into the country that may want to advance a system of law or systems that are contrary to our laws. Here's my question. In doing so, my colleagues acknowledged and said that that would mean that Muslims generally would be in fear of deportation or inability to be brought into the country. Does that not suggest that there's a recognition that Sharia law is central to most of the Muslim population throughout the world and those that come to the United States?
It would seem as if they're aware of that, yes.
And is that true? Is
Yes.
Sharia law central to most Muslims throughout the world?
Absolutely. Sharia is considered divine law, and thus it takes precedence over all other legal systems in areas of the Muslim world where it is not fully implemented, such as Egypt or Syria, other countries. It still has a tremendous cultural influence, such that elements of it are often enforced by individuals or groups where the government doesn't do so.
And is it not true also that there are some 50 plus countries throughout the world in which Sharia is either entirely the law or central to the law in a mixture of its religious implementation, but also its civil?
Yes, that's right. There are 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 56 nations, and the Palestinian Authority.
Is it also not true that when we're talking about the advance of the Islam population, or the population of Muslims that adhere to Islam in this country, that it is not also true that there is significant funding by groups and organizations to push that, including Sharia, into the United States?
Well, there's no doubt whatsoever. You have, for example, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal from Saudi Arabia, who has spent millions and millions of dollars in funding universities such as Georgetown, where they have now the Prince Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding that is designed essentially to whitewash Islam, jihad, and Sharia and present a version of these things that are designed to foster complacency. And also have the government of Qatar doing the same thing on an even larger.
In addition to these countries, in addition to foreign funding, there are organizations such as CARE and other organizations that are designed to implement and advance the existence of Sharia and the advance of Islamism in the United States. Is that true?
Oh, certainly. Omar Ahmed, the co-founder of CARE, has been on record saying the Quran should be the only law of the land. He has denied saying this, but the original reporter stuck by her story. Ibrahim Hooper, the famous spokesman for the organization, said that he wanted to see the government of the United States become Islamic sometime in the future. And this is something that is clear from all of CARE's actions.
And would it be safe to say that the goal of those organizations, and the Muslim Brotherhood, as my friend Mr. Gill said, also from Texas, that the goal of those organizations in advancing Islamist movement in the United States, that the goal is for the Western Hemisphere, for the Western civilization, the United States, and Texas as ground zero to become Islamic?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. That's very clear from the explanatory memorandum of the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that the goal is that Allah's religion is victorious over other religions, and they're working toward eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. And all the non-Muslim apologists for Sharia that we see are indications of how successful that effort has been.
One last question. I'm over my time, then I'll recognize the gentlelady from Wyoming. Is that not inherently political and not just missional? In other words, not just saying, hey, we would like people to know Allah and to know the teachings of Muhammad and Islam, as much as a Christian might want to advance the mission of Christ, but that it is political in ideology and in effect.
There's no doubt whatsoever. This is all about political power. Nihad Awad, the executive director of CARE, has made that quite clear in repeated statements speaking about increasing the number of Muslim congressmen, getting Muslim senators, and increasing Muslim political power on that basis.
I thank the gentleman. I'll now recognize the gentlelady.
Okay. Now, Mr. Spencer, you were cut off before. I'm going to give you just a few minutes. Is there anything you wanted to say that weren't able to say when you were cut off?
Be honest with you, I don't remember when the last time I was cut off was. So
okay, I'm from Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin we have a military base called Fort McCoy, and there are a huge number of people who, on very short notice, inundated Fort McCoy. Eventually, prosecutors charged a couple of the Afghans who were there with serious crimes, sexual assault of a minor, committing domestic violence. I felt in any event that these incidents underscored how inadequate vetting happened before all these people were put in Wisconsin. But in any event, do you know about how many Afghans did the Biden administration bring to the U.S.?
I believe it was about 1,000.
I'll help you. My cheat sheet here says 200,000.
Okay, I'm sure that that's much more accurate. In any case, vetting was essentially non-existent. These were people who were, for the most part, not people who helped us in Afghanistan, but that was by the acknowledgement of Alejandro Mayorkas that they were people who didn't have the special immigrant visas that were given to people who aided us there. And what's noteworthy about the people who were arrested at Fort McCoy is that they said they didn't know that they were violating American law when they molested these young people because what they did was legal in Afghanistan. And that is an indication in microcosm of the dangers of bringing over Sharia adherent Muslims, are adherents of a legal system and cultural mores that are radically different from American law, and if we allow this, they will strip protections from all kinds of people who will be their victims.
This did have serious and tragic consequences, didn't it, by not vetting these folks?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
This did have serious consequences, not vetting these folks?
Absolutely. Well, that's one example is the Afghans who were arrested at Fort McCoy, but there's also the fact that ISIS, as well as the Taliban and Al Qaeda, are quite active in Afghanistan. So you bring over a lot of Afghans without any vetting. You're bringing over almost certainly ISIS, Al Qaeda, and Taliban operatives who believe that they have a responsibility before Allah to wage jihad in the infidel land. And that's going to be something we're going to be seeing the consequences of for years to come.
Okay. What can Congress do to strengthen laws to prevent this type of mass importation of unvetted aliens?
Well, for one thing, vetting would be in order. And that needs to be intelligent and thorough, comprehensive vetting that is not just, are you a member of a terrorist group, which is what it's been for years, but questions that are much more specific that will tease out attitudes and then make it a deportable offense to lie when you're answering these questions.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this. You can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.